Well, everyone, it's another happy day. We get to talk about another gaming console, and this time around, it is the Nintendo 2DS. Now, this is not the XL, this is not the 3DS. This is that random console that Nintendo brought out that I think is probably one of their more interesting, things they've ever dropped. I feel like the 2DS XL, though, is probably one of the better Nintendo consoles that Nintendo dropped out, but I think the 2DS is also a very interesting one as well. Now, if you guys want to pick one up, I don't even know if they still sell them on Amazon, but I'll go ahead and link another one link down below. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now, obviously, the most interesting thing about this console was actually the lack of folding. So there was no folding mechanism to this device. It was straight up just the, screens themselves up front. And I think this is one of those things that's either like a make it or break it to you. In my opinion, I wasn't really a huge fan of it. I mean, I still have my 2DS, and I never really thought to myself like, yes, I'm going to use my 2DS over my 3DS or any other console that I had. I like the ability that it was, a cheaper Nintendo console. Like, I really like that. Starting off, I mean, this thing was $129 when it first came out, and I think I picked mine up for around like $70 like 3 years ago, and you can probably pick them up for way cheaper than that, in my opinion. And again, this is just a cheaper version of the 3DS. Now, this thing was essentially announced in 2013, but the funny thing was that when it first came out, I think a lot of people, including me, kind of thought that it was some sort of a, gimmick or some sort of, like April Fool's joke that Nintendo dropped out, because it was such an interesting concept. So I think one of the best selling things about the 3DS in the beginning was the 3D toggle. But the 2DS didn't have that, and I'm actually totally okay with that. I never really liked the 3D toggle that much anyway. But the other thing that was very interesting about this was, like I mentioned 45,000 times, it was the folding mechanism or lack thereof. That was one of the bigger problems with this type of console, and it's something that just I wasn't really too happy about when it came down to it. Now, on the front of it, or on the top, you had that game card slot. The SD card slot was somewhere around this whole entire device. You had, obviously, looking on the front, two different displays. So the top display was bigger than the bottom one. The top one was 3.53 inches. The bottom one was 3.02 inches. So a little bit of a smaller display on the bottom than the top. But this was pretty much the setup that we had on the original 3DS too. So it kind of made sense with like what Nintendo was doing there. Now, performance and everything was pretty much the same about, the 3DS as well. So you weren't getting like a slower console. As I mentioned before, it was pretty much just a watered down version of the 3DS without a 3D toggle or anything. Now, you do have the D-pad on the left as well as that joystick, so you can go ahead and move around with it and all that stuff. On the right side, you have the start select button, the power button, a front camera, I think, and then the ABXY buttons as well. And again, the concept of it was pretty much the same as all these other, gaming consoles as well. You had the same type of capability except for the 3D toggle. And as I mentioned before, that was a very interesting thing that Nintendo did. It wasn't like the most perfect thing they did, but, I guess it works at the end of it. Now, on the back, it had that camera as well, and that was pretty much it. The same console that the 3DS was here. Now, this one did feel a lot cheaper than the 3DS. It definitely didn't feel like the most premium thing ever. And I think that was probably one of the more, problems with this, I would say. I mean, I like it still, I think it's cool. But again, probably if nobody had a 3DS or 3DS XL, then this was their next option. And you can get pretty much the same type of gameplay from this thing as any other console. Now, this thing was actually discontinued in 2019 in Japan, but pretty much worldwide, it was discontinued in 2020. So we did end up seeing this thing, have a pretty long life cycle for about 7 years. Even though the 2DS XL came out, this thing was still available to buy even up until last year, which was pretty crazy. And I think, for that type of, lifespan, Nintendo must have sold quite a bit of these, in my opinion. Now, the 2DS XL is still being sold, I think, as far as I know, and it's also still being sold even though the 3DS and 3DS XL, I think, stopped being supported. I think they stopped supporting those things in terms of, like selling them out and everywhere. So I think that's another very interesting thing. But that's pretty much a history lesson about the 2DS. I would highly recommend you guys to look back in Nintendo's, videos and see when they initially dropped the 2DS, release trailer video, whatever, and you'll see some interesting comments on that video. It's very, very funny. Now, like I said, the best thing about this 2DS is not only the games that you can play for the 3DS titles, but the DS titles as well. All those DS, DSi, DSi XL games are supported on the 2DS, and that is a massive capability that you have on this device. The fact that you can go ahead and just, put any game that you want to on this thing theoretically and have support for it is pretty insane. And I love having that type of capability. As I mentioned before, being able to just go ahead and put in those game cartridges. Right now we're in this game and age where a lot of these gaming consoles, the PS5s, the Xbox Series S's, they don't necessarily have those type of ports anymore, which really does suck. They don't have game slots. The Switch still has it, and obviously this one does, but I like having that game cartridge capability. You can get games for much cheaper, and you can port over a lot of your older games into your newer gaming library without having to buy them over again or any of that stuff. Now, on top of that, I guess a very, very important thing I want to say, I wasn't going to spend too much time on it, but the modding capability, I still believe there are mods out for the 2DS. So if you purchase a 2DS or 3DS or 3DS XL, I think you should be able to mod it. I did modify my 3DS and my 3DS XL, and I can definitely tell you, I have been getting a much better experience from those consoles than on my non-modded consoles. There's a lot of capability, forget games and stuff, there's just a lot more capability that you have on a modded console than you have on a standard console. So if you're planning on getting a 2DS, I believe, I don't take me out on word for word here, but I do believe the 2DS may actually have some modding capability that if you're under a certain software version, you will be able to modify that, which is going to be awesome. And I think that really pretty much covers up everything, guys. I still think the 2DS is still completely worth it. I think it's great. I think apparently in 2016, the price tag actually went down from $130 to $80, which is a pretty big discount. And I think since then, that was around the same time that I bought my 2DS. So that makes sense why it was about $70, either 2017 or 2016. And as I've mentioned before, I think this console is still a very interesting console. I still think it's worth it. I just probably would recommend to most people that if they were planning on buying this console, maybe sticking with something like a 3DS, the standard one, or even the new 3DS, or potentially even better, a 3DS XL, you're going to be getting better experiences of those things. But I think the best rounded portable Nintendo console that dropped before the Switch is probably the 2DS XL. I feel like that specific console has the most amount of capability, not even in terms of the lack of 3DS toggle or something like that, but I just think in the terms of just, the backwards compatibility that console has and just the battery life and the, screen and the way it looks, I think the 2DS XL looks the best out of all these DSs, to be honest. I think obviously the DS Lite is one of my favorite ones, but the 2DS XL with its matching humongous displays up top and bottom, this console is a beautiful looking console. You cannot go anywhere without seeing this console and looking how beautiful it is. To be honest, it looks kind of like an iPhone up top and an iPhone at the bottom, like with the home button and stuff. It's a very good looking console. I think the 2DS obviously is the predecessor to it, but I would probably recommend getting a 2DS XL probably over something like a 2DS or 3DS or anything like that. But take it as you will, but that's kind of how I see it. Like I mentioned, if you guys want to pick up this console or 2DS XL, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section as well. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys get that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.